Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stories from the Archives. I am Tim Nutt, the director of the UAMS Historical Research Center. And the Historical Research Center is a division of the UAMS Library. We are located in the library on the 5th floor. And our mission is to preserve the institutional records of UAMS. So all the reports and announcements and everything like that that is produced by UAMS. We are in charge of preserving those, as well as the general history of the medical and health and other health sciences in Arkansas. So materials documenting physicians and practices from all around the state, from Fayetteville to Lake Village and from Paragould to Texarkana. And I'd like to welcome you if you'd like to take a tour of our facility. We'd love to have you. As I mentioned, we are on the 5th floor of the library, and would love to have you here and show you some of the interesting items in our collection. And also, if you are interested in donating any materials or items, artifacts to our collection, I'd love to speak with you about that. And I'm pleased to have you all here today for Stories from the Archives. Logan Whittington is our resource management librarian in the library. And so she deals with all the electronic resources and cataloging and all that stuff that makes it easier to find materials in the library. And I'm so glad that she's going to be here to talk about medical toys and medical play. And so I'm going to turn off my camera and my audio and turn it over to Logan, but I will just a couple more reminders. This is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the UAMS Historical Research Center website soon after today. And then if you have any questions, please use the chat feature and we'll answer those at the end of the session. So Logan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Like Tim said, my name is Logan Whittington, and I am the Resource Management Librarian here at the UAMS Library. I'm here today as a representative of the UAMS Archive and Historical Research Center to present the next iteration of our quarterly Stories from the Archives series. One of the goals of this series, in addition to raising awareness about the Historical Research Center, is to showcase artifacts in the archive collection that you may not have seen. Today, I'll be sharing some photos and information about the archive's collection of medical toys, but first, I will briefly discuss the history of medical toys and how medical toys and medical play can contribute to a child's development. Okay, so here is a brief overview of the structure of my presentation. We'll start with defining what a toy is. Then there'll be a brief history of toys and medical toys specifically, followed by research on the importance of medical play. Lastly, I'll showcase specific examples of medical toys that are currently a part of the UAMS Library's archive collection, which hopefully will resonate with you following the context I've provided in the earlier parts of the presentation. So I know this is probably not necessary, but I still felt like it was important to define what a toy actually is and what differentiates toys from other objects. Some of this is, of course, subjective and contextual, but it's at its most basic definition, a toy is something that a child can play with. Now, we can argue that toys don't necessarily have to be for children, and they don't even necessarily have to be played with. They can be also collected. But when it comes to toy manufacturing, children are obviously the target audience, and the goal is for children to play with whatever it is. Toys can enable children to have fun or be entertained while developing skills and learning about the world around them. For example, toys for babies may be geared toward developing motor skills or speech, whereas toys for older children may focus more on problem solving or developing social skills. In one article I read, I found this definition that I quite enjoyed, which states that a toy is an artifact of popular culture, reflective and topical, yet delightful and also frivolous. Moving on to a brief history, objects with human and animal forms, which some researchers believe may have been toys, were discovered in deposits from ancient Sumer that date back to 2600 BCE, and this was the earliest example that I could find. The earliest known written record of a toy comes from Greece from around 500 BCE, and it references a yo-yo, though yo-yos are believed to have originated in China at a much earlier date. Other early examples of toys include dolls, kites, carts, and animals on wheels, and brass and bronze figurines, but those were usually for more wealthy families and children. Ancient and early toys tend to fall under two categories, which would be imitative or instructive, and this has continued through to today. The earliest examples of play with toys probably originated from the human instinct for self-preservation, where young children were taught to use weapons to fight or to hunt. Objects like a small bow and arrow for young boys in ancient Rome may not have been considered toys at the time, merely miniature versions of adult weapons that were shrunk for training or necessity, not for play. Some toys also originate from magical or religious artifacts, like sugar skulls from the Mexican festival for the Day of the Dead, Easter eggs, or Christmas tree decorations. Toys are also used to instruct children on developing domestic skills, such as cooking, cleaning, childcare, etc. Historically, toys have also enforced cultural expectations about the social context surrounding them, especially regarding gender roles. When narrowing the focus to Western societies, American psychologist Jeffrey Goldstein suggests that gendered preferences for certain toys develop early. They may take root by even age 2, if not earlier, and is perpetuated both by modeling from parents as well as a child's peers. So now specifically, we'll get into the history of medical toys, but I did want to also preface this by saying that it's a good time to acknowledge that childhood in America today, as we perceive it, did not always exist. Advances in industry, growth of the middle class, and improvements in healthcare have created an environment where children have fewer, if not virtually zero, expectations to take on adult responsibilities like working. So there's more time for play. As such, it may be no surprise to note that modern medical toys came from a darker origin, which is military medicine. As public perception of physicians changed in the 18th and 19th centuries as a result of medical developments like anesthesia and antibiotics, which greatly improved healthcare, physicians gained credibility and the career became more respected and maybe even idolized, especially for its role in wartime. Toy manufacturers sought to profit off of this shift. As military medical corps grew in importance, the military medical toy became more and more popular. The famous English toy soldier maker Britain's Limited began production in 1893, which quickly eclipsed an industry previously dominated by French and German toy makers. The line included the components of the Royal Army Medical Corps, including physicians, soldiers, and stretcher teams, which is on the top of that photo on the left. Nurses and visibly but superficially wounded soldiers were also later added to that collection. After World War I, Britain's Limited introduced the toy motorized ambulance, also shown in the photo on the left. The love for motorized vehicles spread rapidly through America as well. And as vehicles modernized over time, toy manufacturers like Matchbox and Tootsie Toy kept the pace. You can often trace ambulance development by researching how the toys themselves changed over time. The popularity of the nursing profession, perpetuated by figureheads like Florence Nightingale and others, led to the incorporation of nurses in military ranks and subsequently the manufacture of dolls dressed in nurses' uniforms. Generally speaking, one can look at medical toys throughout history and trace back the timeline of war, industry, and also medical advancement. So now we're going to take a look at medical toys and their important role in child development. Specifically, the term used in child development in the child development field is called medical play. Medical play can help children safely learn about medical procedures while also helping them process their own health experiences and also lead to an awareness of their own bodies that they may not have previously possessed. Medical play can help make children more comfortable in a hospital environment, and it can also teach them to be active participants in their own medical care. There are 4 characteristics of medical play, according to Kathleen McHugh, who has a lot of research on this topic. First, medical play always has part of its content medically themed and or includes the use of medical equipment. Second, medical play may be modeled, initiated, or offered by an adult, but is voluntarily maintained by the child. Third, medical play is usually enjoyable and entertaining for the child and is often accompanied by laughter or relaxation, but the process of play can sometimes be intense or aggressive. And then fourth, medical play and medical preparation are not the same, and they are not interchangeable. Education can occur without play, and play may follow familiarization as well. So there are 4 main types of medical play, which I'll define for you. The first, role reversal or role rehearsal, is the most common. A child may take on the role of a healthcare professional or a patient and mimic a medical procedure or event through the use of dolls or toy medical tools. The second type of medical play is medical pretend or medical fantasy, which relates to the first in that it includes a role-playing aspect as well, but does not include toys or objects directly associated with or inspired by medicine. In fact, it may not include any toys or outside objects at all. The third type of medical play is referred to as indirect. This one's a bit more vague, but it does not usually involve role play. It instead is centered around familiarization, exploration, and education related to medical experience. An example of this would be a word game or puzzle with a medical theme, or using traditional medical equipment in a non-medical way, like blowing air into an examination glove and tying it off like a balloon or something, just to sort of like maybe put a child at ease while they're in a hospital room. The last type is medical art. This could be more structured, like a medical themed coloring book, or more loose, like a child drawing a picture of a doctor without any prompting or guidance. So now we're going to examine some specific examples of medical toys in the UAMS archive collection, and I'd like you to try to think about these toys within the context of the history I mentioned, as well as how they relate back to the concepts of medical play. So first up, we have the ever popular game Operation. An electrified box that buzzed and reacted to metal hitting the edges was invented by John Spinello in the year 1962. When he sold a patent for $500, it was originally planned to be marketed as a desert survival game. When manufacturer Milton Bradley acquired the license, they changed the concept to medicine, which proved to be a good choice. The player has to use tweezers to extract small parts from an illustrated human body that is on top of the box and avoid touching the edges of the compartments to prevent the reaction. Next, we have Play-Doh's Drill and Fill, which is a Play-Doh product. The basis for Play-Doh putty was invented by a soap manufacturer in Ohio, and when it was offered to school children who used it to mold objects and make crafts, they really enjoyed it, so it was marketed as a children's toy. Play-Doh was officially launched in 1956 and is now owned by Hasbro. The Play-Doh Drill and Fill, to be specific about what we've got, simulates a dental exam. The player can use the included Play-Doh putty to mold teeth, which are then inserted into the compartments in a rather humorous human plastic head. The player can then use included tools to mimic teeth cleaning, extraction, add and remove cavities, or procedures like filling cavities with some of the silver Play-Doh that's included. The design is, of course, intended to be exaggerated and kind of funny, which I enjoy. And then the next toys I'm going to highlight are the Barbie You Can Do Anything series, which has doctors, nurse dolls, dentists, etc. When Barbie was created by Ruth Hadler in 1959, she was responding to what she perceived as a gap in the doll market, where baby dolls perpetuated the role of only the child, usually a girl, as a caregiver, and there was not a doll that a child could project themselves onto directly as a companion or a reflection of themselves. This marketing perspective has developed over the years to include Barbies such as the ones you see on your screen, which represent specific careers that a child could aspire to fill. Interestingly, in my view, the text blurb that I've written out in full on the back shows how much Barbie marketing has changed even between the relatively recent 2016 and 2020 year that these may have come out to now. Generally speaking, most Barbies have been accused of being a little controversial in how they perpetuate gender roles, and some of that is evident in the blurb that I've posted here. Also, Barbies are also a collector's item, so some of the language that is on the back of the box doesn't always seem to be geared toward children. For example, it says that, you know, a doctor is smart and can help us stay healthy, but it also says phrases like examine symptoms, diagnose a problem, and prescribe appropriate treatment, which in my mind is maybe not geared toward a young child, but maybe an older child or even an adult collector. So just to really quickly go through some more highlights from the collection we've got. I'm going to close out by just going through some of these pretty quickly. The first on the left is a G.I. Joe action figure and profile card, which I thought was pretty interesting. It also includes a stretcher and then a toy rifle, as well as this very amusing trio of Smurf figurines, which I really like. And then we've also got a hospital playset from 1976 that can be built first with multiple options. So the walls can be inserted in different ways into that green platform at the bottom. And then the child can play with the included annual figurines and props within that setting. And lastly, my personal favorites, the ever whimsical Doctor and Nurse troll puppets from the 90s, who are having a fantastic hair day. So in conclusion, I'd like to reiterate that medical toys play an important role in helping children grow comfortable with medicine and understanding their own health, and they can also inspire children to be medical professionals themselves or just inspire interest in the medical field as a whole. Toys are cultural products and therefore reflect history, which includes the history of medicine. And the UAMS Archive and Historical Research Center are dedicated to preserving and sharing that history. So we invite you, as Tim said, to keep attending presentations like this one, or visit our area on the 5th floor of the UAMS library to see artifacts from the collection in person. So then, just in case you're interested, here are my references and then my contact information, and I welcome any questions or comments that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Logan. I appreciate that. Very interesting presentation. And I was wondering, could you get a maybe the history, the background of how we started collecting the toys? You know that story?
I do not, so go ahead and share.
Okay, I will tell that story. So the genesis of this collection, and Logan, if you'll close out your screen, I'm going to make our two screens bigger so we can just have a conversation like this. Mm-hmm. So the genesis of the collection started with, I was just going through stuff at my house and deciding what I wanted to keep and what I didn't want to keep. And I came across little figurines from Fisher Price. When Fisher Price, they had a hospital, it was in the 70s sometime. And so I had the figurine. I didn't have the hospital anymore. But I had the little figurines, and it had came with a little an ambulance with a little stretcher in the back, and and then it had a weight machine and a crib, or not a crib, but what do you call it when they're in the hospital and the baby's in them? Is it a crib? Maybe it is a crib.
Like a bassinet, maybe?
Maybe a bassinet, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I gave those to the Historical Research Center, and that's what started the collection, is because we were trying to. I decided, well, you know, I had not heard of any other archives collecting toys. Medical toys. And so I thought that might be a really good idea for an exhibit. Mm-hmm. And so we started gathering materials or items. We got the Society for the History of Medicine and Health Professions, which is our support organization, gave us a little bit of money to buy some toys off of eBay. And so, mm-hmm. so we just started gathering items for this exhibit, and then we just decided that, you know, it would be interesting to create an archival collection based around these toys. And so that's what we did. So I think it's good. I think it's going to be a really interesting thing. I don't think there's another archives.
That's
I couldn't find
that's
it,
really surprising, because pretty much every like research article I came across that discussed like the history of like medical toys always made a point to say that they were like very representative of how culture changed over time, and like a good way to like visualize what was important or what was valued by the society at the time. I mean, a lot of it, of course, had to do with like war and the military, but even just
Right.
like I said, like social contracts and stuff. So I find it interesting that there's not more collections, because it seems like it'd be kind of obvious that that would be an important thing to preserve. Maybe because they're objects, it's not as easy, or maybe people don't think of them as like having as much historical value, especially
Right.
like the more modern ones.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's important.
And of course, I think there is a toy museum that collects all kinds of toys.
Right, but in terms of like having, I think it's more interesting to have a specific one, because then you can look at it within the context of like that singular subject.
Right.
Which makes it more resonating, I think.
We did have some issues with the chat. I think I fixed it. So if you have any questions, type it into the chat and we'll see. Hopefully that worked. What do you think about you mentioned, you just touched briefly on the gender stereotypes with toys. And I think we've kind of seen a shift towards maybe getting away from that. And
yes, it's very recent that I didn't include it in my presentation because I couldn't find like what they were basing this off of. It kind of just seemed like an opinion, but that Bayer Voltes, or I'm not sure how you say his last name, author mentioned that he wrote his article in the late 80s or mid 80s, and he said that the gender norm thing was sort of just coming out of being so staunch within the last 20 years of when he wrote that article. But I would even argue that it continued. It kind of still is happening to this day. Like the Barbie example I gave, like they have obviously generally been marketed towards girls and have been like traditionally very feminine sort of considered toys, but they're not like a childcare toy like a baby doll is. So less so. So that's why they focus on like, you can be anything you want to be, and you're not just, you know, a mom or whatever, which is cool, but they're still like very gendered items. And like even the doctor one said, like, a girl can be a doctor, like this is for girls. And like, while that is important, I think that could also isolate like maybe a boy who wants to buy that Barbie, because on the back it just says this is for girls and this is a girl, and it's very stereotyped, I think. And I think more recently they've come away from that, but it's still pretty fresh. And I do think it is important to have, I'm not saying like you shouldn't have toys that are marketed for specific types of people. I think that is important, but I do think it's important to maybe be a little more open in your marketing. And that's a lot more recent. I mean, beginning from the military toys, like they didn't add nurses until later. First, it was the soldiers and the doctors and the like more traditionally masculine, I guess I would say, kind of marketing. And then they added nurses later, but only nurses as caregivers. And like that didn't happen until people were like, oh, nurses are valuable and respectable. And that would be a good career for a girl to have. So then like the dolls started getting the nurses' uniforms and things. But yeah, it's interesting. I did see some information in an encyclopedia article I read about it that said even without prompting, over the span of like, they did a lot of research in like Taiwan specifically, which I found interesting, that if you ask children to pick toys like without prompting them, majority of the time they'll pick them along gendered norms. But as they said, like that comes from, you know, parental pressure, peer pressure, just like the environments they're in. So it's not really something that can be studied within like an isolated way very well, I think, because it just has so many factors that go into like what creates that environment for children. But it's really only fairly recently that they've started expanding on the marketing, at least in the West, I think.
I think it's interesting that for the Barbie, at least. I think the Dr. Barbie came out in, was it 73? Do you know that? Do you know the date for that?
I'm not sure. I only looked at the one that we have. I didn't go beyond.
I think it's, if I might be mistaken, but I think in my research, I think the Dr. Barbie came out in 1973, which is fairly early.
That's cool. Yeah.
And I think she became a doctor before she became a nurse.
I love that.
So I think that's really great. And I think that was revolutionary in 1973.
Yeah, I would say so, because a lot of the other things we do have from the 70s tend to not be, in my view, very radical. So that's cool.
And of course, the collection that we do have, and I don't know how many items. Suzanne, Suzanne Easley's our archivist in the Historical Research Center. Suzanne, do you know how many items we have in that collection? You can just type it in the chat if you know it. But I do, it's that we want that collection to be pretty comprehensive. So you showed the Smurfs and the troll dolls and of course the Barbies.
Yeah, I also noticed we had some more like advanced, like that anatomy model that's back there. Like that could maybe be argued to be a toy, but also a collector's item. That's always the tricky part about this discussion is like, is it a toy or is it a collector's item or is it both?
You're right.
So that's always interesting to see how that's
of course when it gets into the archives, it becomes a collector's item.
Exactly. Anything can be a collector's item.
So Suzanne mentioned that we have right now 25 toys in the collection, and the collection is pretty, it's comprehensive. I mean, it covers all aspects. So in like the Smurfs and the dolls and things like that, we also have board games. And so my childhood copy or board game Emergency, if you remember that TV show from the 1970s, that's in there. We have the Game of Life. And then I can't think of any other games off the top of my head, but things like that. And of course, the Game of Life, you might not necessarily think it's health related or health sciences related, but it takes you through basically your whole life. You know, you get married, you have kids, you go to the hospital and things like that. And so that's why that game is included in there.
Right.
So, and I would encourage anyone who's watching this, you know, if you are interested in donating, we would love to talk with you and to continue to add to our collection. The exhibit, we installed this exhibit, unfortunately, right at the beginning of COVID. And so not very many people saw it while it was on campus, but we'll install it again eventually. But I would love to continue to add to this collection, because I think it's just so interesting, and it really does show not only the gender stereotypes, but it shows the progression away from gender stereotypes too. You know, so the earlier ones, you have the dolls in pink, or the nurses in pink or white or whatever, and then the boys' toys are more, you know, masculine and
I thought like
colors and things like that.
The Barbie that's the nurse, like if you took her out of the box that says she's a nurse, she would look like a doctor. They didn't really do anything to her to make her like just a nurse, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, she doesn't have a white coat, but that's only, you know, one costume of being a doctor, right? So I think that generally there may be toys can be more versatile than how they're marketed to be. So it's always interesting to see what they think is important whenever they're creating the product. One
of the items that we had in the exhibit, which I thought was pretty cool, it was on loan to us, but it was the MASH 4077 that was used, just sort of a replica of the television show MASH, you know, the mobile surgical unit. And so I thought that one was pretty cool in it. And so it's just a really interesting collection. And just, you know, even if you're really not interested in the medical aspect of it or the toy aspect of it, medical toy aspect of it, just looking at it from a toy perspective is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the chat. The chat is working now. So if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And if not, Logan had her contact information on the screen. If you have questions afterwards, please feel free to contact Logan. So, and it's interesting because when I have my email up on my other screen, and while I was talking, something came up from a product from Amazon recommending a toy.
How'd they know?
The
The FBI is watching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Well, okay. It doesn't look like we have any questions. And so, Logan, thank you again for the presentation.
Oh, someone is asking a question.
Oh, are they?
They said, I came in late, but did you mention where someone could donate toys?
Yes, if you're interested in donating them, you can get in touch with me or Logan. My email is tgnutt@uams.edu, and then Logan's is
here. I'll just type it in the chat.
Yeah. Well, that's I didn't think about that.
And then what is yours?
TG nut yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's more of a thing. I didn't even think about typing it in the chat.
Oh, I only sent it to host and panelists. That doesn't help anyone.
We're still trying to get
compliment,
used to
Suzanne.
this. But yeah, if you are interested in donating, we'd love to visit with you and talk with you about it.
Libby said she loves the trolls. Me too. I love trolls. I
Trolls
had trolls when I was
really
a kid, so I saw those. I was like,
and we have puppets. We have a doctor puppet. We have a nurse puppet, I believe. And Kaylee Henderson, who used to work in the Historical Research Center, she was in charge of scouring eBay and looking for toys. So that was I think she really enjoyed doing.
Oh yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
It is. It really is. So.
Okay, well thank you so much, everyone. Yep.
What'd you say?
I just said thanks to everybody that came.
Yeah, thank you again. And have you thought about loaning this display for someone public? Yes. I think it would be great if we'll get in touch with maybe one of the branches of the public library system and maybe do an exhibit with them, because I think having it on UAMS campus is great, but it also kind of limits who gets to see it, especially it was in the old hospital, the central building. So if you didn't go that way, or you never come on UAMS campus, you never get to see it.
And it would probably increase donations because it come in contact with a lot more people that actively have children. So
yes.
Are
there any medical toys before the 1950s?
Yes. So generally everything I saw looked like early 19th century, probably was when it sort of started to become popular, and then spiked in the mid 19th century. But I mean, you can argue pretty much any like medical miniature could have been considered a toy, but that's when they really like gained popularity in Europe. And then obviously like peaked around like each World War, as wartime became the focus of society. But yeah, they definitely predate the 50s.
I think having dolls, we don't have very many dolls in our collection right now, as far as, full-size dolls. I remember my sister growing up, she had one of those dolls, you held its hand and it would walk while you held it. And
yeah.
I asked her about it, and she had thrown it away at some point, which I was very disappointed in.
Yeah, that's the thing that happens. People donate or throw stuff away, and then, But yeah, so if you guys have anything, let us know.
Yes, we would love to have it. We do have a Cabbage Patch Kid, but we do need to add some siblings to the Cabbage Patch Kid. So
Cabbage Patch Kid needs friends.
Yes, she does. Thank you all for being here. Again, if you have any other questions after the presentation, please feel free to email Logan or myself. And Our next story from the archives, I think it'll be about 3 or 4 months. I can't remember, but we'll send out emails and announcements like we did for this one. And if you have an idea or a suggestion as to what you would like to hear, as far as learning more about what we have in the archives, please feel free to shoot me an email about that as well. Thank you again, Logan, for the presentation, and thank you all for being here, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.